Hello everyone, you're watching Ukraine Breaking News. My name is Maria Kahal and today we're talking to a retired US Army officer and former commander of the US Army in Europe, Ben Hodges. Hello, Ben.
Hello, thanks for having me.
First of all, I wanted to ask you, how do you feel about the new United States president that recently inaugurated?
Well, of course, I was not happy with the outcome of the election, but he was elected, and so now he is the president. So there's no denying that. I was not encouraged by what I heard yesterday during the inauguration, even though it was a peaceful transition of power, which is an important part of our democracy. Several things that he said during his speech and immediately afterwards give me concern about our democracy and about how he intends to go forward.
And about Ukraine, especially, Trump has obviously realized that he cannot stop the war in Ukraine within 24 hours. How likely is it that the war, at least its hot phase, will stop this year?
Well, I think this depends on Ukraine and Russia more than it does on the United States. I'm going to sound a little bit hopeful here. First, Mr. Trump comes into office with a lot more leverage over Putin than he had 4 years ago or 8 years ago. I mean, Russia is in trouble. Their economy is in trouble. The Russian military has failed to accomplish any of its objectives, and they did not have the ability to save their ally Bashar al-Assad in Syria. So these are all indicators of Russian weakness. Meanwhile, Mr. Trump comes into office. He's at the peak of his political power. He will inherit the strongest economy in the world, the U.S. economy, and he has dozens of allies that want to help Ukraine, but they need American leadership. So he has leverage. Plus, he could leave in place without having to do anything some Biden policies that were implemented very late, admittedly, but nonetheless, they were implemented, talking about sanctions against Russian shadow fleet boats carrying oil to India and China, lifting of restrictions on Ukrainian use of ATACMS inside Russia. And I think there are more than $2 billion worth of aid that were already approved but have not yet been delivered. Mr. Trump could tell Putin he's going to allow these things to keep going if he does not negotiate. So there is the possibility of some good things to happen, but he didn't say anything yesterday clearly in the inauguration, and I wished he had.
And talking about Biden presidency, in general, how would you assess the pace and level of assistance provided to Ukraine during his presidency? And Trump says that Biden could have prevented the war. So maybe I agree that Biden did really good things for Ukraine, but maybe what could he done differently or more? For example, not withdraw the embassy or provide weapons in advance, or maybe come to Kiev and say something like really loud and clear? Was it real to prevent the war in Ukraine?
Well, of course, as you know, the war started 11 years ago in 2014. So Mr. Trump was in office during 4 years of this war. So this is a classic attempt by him to deflect blame for him not solving it or stopping it when he was in office. But yes, Mr. Biden could have done much more. The most important thing Mr. Biden could have done as president was to declare that we wanted Ukraine to win, that it was our policy that Ukraine should defeat Russia because it's in our strategic interest, that this was not charity to Ukraine, but this was in our interest. And he could have provided all kinds of aid as well as used the economic tools much earlier. That would have made a huge difference. So President Biden is a good man. He wanted to avoid nuclear war. Unfortunately, he failed to do the most important thing, which was to clearly identify America's strategic objective and do what should have been done to help Ukraine defeat Russia. We've missed a chance to help fix European security for decades by not helping Ukraine defeat Russia. So we'll see what happens in the coming months. And I think my slight optimism is based on Mr. Trump no longer seeing Putin as this savvy genius, but instead sees him as a loser. And perhaps there'll be less willingness to fawn over President Putin.
There is an opinion that Ukraine were given just enough help not to lose, but not enough to win. Do you agree with that?
That's exactly right.
Not only from the United States, but from Europe and other allies also.
Yeah, Germany, UK, France, other countries could have and should have done much more. Now, some countries, like Estonia and some other Eastern European countries, gave everything they had. But the big ones could have done much more, including Germany, which was the second largest contributor. But that was not the standard. The standard should have been, what do you need for Ukraine to win? But, they were all really looking to the United States to provide that leadership. And I think the U.S. probably discouraged some countries from doing more, both directly as well as by our own failure to do more.
And we've all also seen that controversial statements of Trump. I don't know if that was serious thing or not, about Panama Canal, Greenland and Canada, and how likely is it a conflict between United States and Canada, United States and Denmark over Greenland and Panama over the Panama Canal can be the trigger for conflict? And what was it? Because does Trump really believe that he can make America greater, literally, or what?
I take him serious that when he talks about expanding American territory, I mean, this is like something from the 19th century, and it's bizarre, not something you would expect to hear from an American president, but I take it serious. These are all unnecessary provocations. Greenland, which is was given the right by Denmark to self-rule, still is governed by Denmark in terms of foreign policy and defense policy. The Danes and Greenland have allowed the United States to have a base in Greenland since the Second World War. So we're already there. The Danes and Greenland would welcome U.S. investment, expansion of the military. I mean, so this was an unnecessary provocation against a NATO ally, Denmark. I think it's extremely unlikely that something will happen, but the fact that you and I are even talking about this is a gift to the Kremlin. With Panama, not a NATO ally, but nonetheless, this has been a country with which we've been friendly for decades. And, my research is that the United States pays no more to use the canal than does any other country's ships. Yes, there is a Hong Kong company, a Chinese company that operates parts of the canal, but it's not controlled by the Chinese or with Chinese soldiers there. Still, this is a vulnerability that exists in much of our transportation infrastructure where Chinese companies control the ports or parts of the ports, to include here in Germany, in Hamburg, for example. So this is something that's a legitimate concern about Chinese influence. But, the claims by Mr. Trump about why we should be able to take Panama Canal, I think is, seems to me to be in violation of numerous international law. And this will be a test. This will be a test for the new Secretary of Defense whenever he is confirmed, and for the officers in the military leadership. If they are told that this is what's going to happen, will they pass the test of not obeying an illegal order? So I think This is going to be a problem. And then the threats against Canada, it's bizarre. Yes, Canada should be paying a lot more for their defense. They benefit from being our neighbor. And a country with so much wealth should be doing much better on their own defense. But, it's also it's one of our biggest trading partners, and I think there's other ways to do things.
Yeah, but saying such things kind of reminds me of Russia when Russia says something controversial about like invading other countries and no one reacts to this like it's normal thing, and it's kind of similar to that, no?
It is exactly similar to that, and that's the problem. In a normal time, no American president would say outrageous things like this because it undermines the international rules-based order. And it makes it very difficult for the United States now to criticize China or Russia for what they're doing. And the Chinese and the Russians and others will say, look, we've just gotten a green light from the White House, basically, to do what the hell we want. And so this is much more significant than the Panama Canal. This is about the international rules-based order that we all depend on, and from which the United States has benefited more than anybody.
And also Trump said that it's because of him, Israel and Hamas signed a ceasefire agreement. What do you think about it? And what do you think about Trump policy towards Israel, Hamas, and Hezbollah and this region?
Well, I think Trump supporters will believe that it was only because of him that this happened. So, this is not something you can argue back. The fact is, I grew up believing what Henry Ford said, that there's no end to the good a man can do if he does not care who gets the credit. But this reveals the character and the narcissistic approach to life of Donald Trump. Now, I think the Biden administration, the people below the level, actually were working together. You had Mr. Trump's envoy and Mr. Biden's Department of State were working together with the Israelis and the Qataris and the Egyptians and Hamas to get to this. So it is accurate that Mr. Trump had something to do with it. I think what's going to be interesting going forward, does the Netanyahu regime now feel that they can do whatever they want once they get some of the rest of their hostages? Do they see that when Mr. Trump said all hell will break loose? I think you can imagine that the Netanyahu regime might take this as they're now unrestricted.
Oh, yes, it's not the other side of the problem, but it was a really good and significant deal that they signed to get people back. So it's very important. I don't know what will be after this. Maybe ceasefire will end, but this is very important.
Of course, it's great that at least these three young women were released. There's still over 100 that have not been released. And it's also important to note that there were a lot of Palestinians, women and children, who were also released. And I think that obviously I hope to see this go forward. I hope to see this agreement fully implemented. We'll see.
Yeah. And let's go back to Ukraine. You have been following the war in Ukraine since the Russian invasion. Please assess Russia's military capabilities now, how long they can last.
Well, it's hard to know for sure because I don't trust any number that comes out of Russia in terms of industrial capacity, economic numbers, that sort of thing. But I think most experts that look at Russia's economy is that it's in trouble, that they cannot make up all of their losses, that they're losing more tanks and artillery and equipment than they can produce. They depend on North Korea for ammunition. They depend on Iran for drones and ballistic missiles. They depend on China for technology. That's why the sanctions on the Shadow Fleet vessels, I think there's like 188 of them or something that are sanctioned. If Russia is not able to sell its oil to China and India, that will significantly reduce their ability to purchase ammunition and other things from Iran, North Korea, and China. So that will have an impact. And I hope that the Trump administration will leave those sanctions in place. That to me is the most important economic thing we can watch, I think. Now, the number of troops they've lost, I think Putin doesn't care as long as they don't come from Moscow or St. Petersburg. He doesn't care how many casualties they have. But he has been avoiding, I believe, any sort of conscription of men from the two major metropolitan areas, because obviously he does not want to have funerals in those two cities.
Of course.
The North Koreans, of the 12,000 that have come, I read this morning that 4,000 of them have been killed or wounded or captured. So I don't know how much of an impact this is going to have. From Ukrainians with whom I speak, they have a respect for the North Korean troops as being tough, fit, but not yet well trained, or they were trained for the wrong war. So we'll see how much more the North Korean government is willing to send their soldiers. I don't see this makes a big difference in anything yet.
And talking about North Koreans, in your opinion, how much longer will Kim Jong-un help Kremlin with equipment and manpower? And won't this lead to internal problems in North Korea? Because Asian media report that people are dissatisfied with what's happening right now because their sons, their husbands are dying there. What do you think? And does North Korea have this that much equipment and manpower to just give to Russia? Or it's continue?
Well, they certainly have a lot of manpower. The North Korean army is a large army, and they know that South Korea is not going to attack them. And I think Kim Jong-un also will not mourn the loss of North Korean soldiers any more than Putin mourns the loss of Russian soldiers. And so as long as he gets paid and whatever else Russia is providing to North Korea, whether it's technology for nuclear weapons or oil or whatever the exchange is with North Korea, as long as that continues, I imagine he will continue to do it. But again, even worse than Russia, we don't really know exactly what goes on inside North Korea.
Yeah, and I think we won't know, at least now. And also on January 14, Ukraine launched a series of successful strikes against Russia's strategic facilities in 12 regions. These are powerful plants that provide Russia with fuel for their troops. And will this reduce the intensity and scale of missile attacks on Ukraine, and how it will affect Russia?
Well, I think this is impressive what Ukraine is able to do. That while at war, Ukraine has actually increased its long-range precision drone capability, and it will only get better as they develop drones that can carry heavier or larger payloads. So going after these kind of targets is exactly what they should be doing as part of their war effort, not only defending where their troops are, but also destroying or disrupting Russia's ability to supply its own troops, as well as disrupting its oil industry overall, because that's the only thing that I think that keeps Russia in the war is their oil industry. So impressive how effective they have been, and really something that Russia has not been able to stop more effectively, these drone strikes.
And also, do you agree that Ukraine needs to lower their mobilization age to 18 years old, or I don't know, because a lot of our allies and Western experts say that we should. But Volodymyr Zelensky, our president, said that now more than 100 brigades on the battlefield need to be equipped with additional equipment. So he emphasized that this should be a priority for international partners and not mobilization age. What do you think about this, and who is right?
Well, I think this is a decision for Ukraine. I did not like it when I heard that Mr. Sullivan, but also Mr. Waltz, the National Security Advisor for Mr. Trump, pointed to this almost as an excuse of why Ukraine is not doing better because of this, but it actually is an excuse by Mr. Sullivan to cover up their failure. Of course, Ukraine needs more soldiers, but it's not because they are not recruiting enough young people. It's because I believe the government has not done a good job of earning the confidence of Ukrainian families that their son or daughter will not be sent to the front unless they have been properly equipped, properly trained, and put into a well-trained unit. I think there probably are still some families that have memories of the old Soviet times and see the army as a prison army. And they worried that their son or daughter or brother would be wasted. And so this is the job of the government, to assure them, to earn their confidence that these young people of whatever age will be properly trained and equipped and properly led. So this is about confidence. And I think there are enough Ukrainians 26 or older that could fill the ranks if families were confident. So just lowering the age is not the solution. I mean, there are millions of Ukrainians military age already that are here in Germany and Poland and Romania that should be encouraged to come home to Ukraine to fight. But they need to be confident that they'll be well trained and equipped, and if something should happen, that their family will be taken care of, just like if it was an American soldier.
And what do you think also about negotiations between Ukraine and Russia that will be initiated by Trump, I guess, this year or maybe next year? How do you see these negotiations, basically?
We don't know exactly how this is going to happen. I'm sure that General Kellogg, the envoy for President Trump, will be working hard with Ukrainians and Russians and others to bring about some sort of negotiations. Ultimately, I think Ukrainian government, President Zelensky, and others know that Russia will never live up to any agreement. And it was important that General Kellogg said that Russia cannot be trusted. That's a good start point for any negotiation, is to acknowledge that Russia cannot be trusted. And I think that the number one objective should not be stop the fighting. I mean, that's not an end state, because Russia won't stop. They may pause for a couple of years, but they're not going to stop unless they're defeated. And Ukraine has the ability to significantly increase its own ability to defend itself, perhaps with the help of European or U.S. capabilities. I think that the Ukrainian government knows what it can do and can continue to do. I sort of feel like Ukraine has the ability to continue doing what it's doing well into this year. And I also believe that some European countries realize that Ukraine cannot fail, or they will pay the price. And so, I can't predict with any confidence how this is going to happen. But I'm sure that the Russians believe that they are, any negotiation for them is only temporary, and that they get to keep everything they already have. That will be their expectation. And I think if we allow that to happen, or encourage Ukraine to accept that, then this will only delay resumption of conflict. And it also will discourage investors from wanting to contribute to the reconstruction of Ukraine.
Yes. And just to finish our interview, I want to ask you about your expectations from 2025. And please give us a good forecast. We hope for it.
Well, I've always been a believer in positive leadership, and Ukraine has positive leadership. I also believe in the human spirit, and that's part of the reason I'm so inspired by what Ukrainian women and men do in the military, but also in the population. And I believe that there are Europeans who understand what's at stake here, that if Ukraine fails, that there will be Russian troops coming to other European countries next, within the next 2 or 3 years. And I think they're beginning to finally understand that, and that they can't just wait and hide behind the United States. And then finally, even though I have not seen the strong message from President Trump, or even any message about, yes, of course we want Ukraine to win, I do think that there are members of his cabinet, his advisors, and also in the Congress, including Republicans, that support Ukraine. And so I'm not ready to give up just yet that the Trump administration will not support Ukraine. It seems that way, but I'm not ready to give up on that yet.
Yeah, and also Democrats are still in Congress, and a lot of congressmen really support Ukraine. So we hope that everything will be as good as possible. Thank you very much for the interview.
Thank you very much for the privilege.